Awesome. Well, we'll get started. We'll kick us off here today. I just want to welcome you all to our latest webinar on succession planning. And we're so excited to have Howard and Karina here with us today. They are joining us from New York at the law offices of Howard J. Finkelstein. And before we started off, I just want to commend you all for joining us and taking this first step in your plan. Because as you can see on the screen, what we're sharing here today is if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And we're so glad that you are all here taking that first step in your plan. And we're so happy to have Howard and Karina with us, helping sharing their expertise and their guidance, and hopefully leading us all to success. Before we start, I want to just do a couple housekeeping things. We will have Howard and Karina doing a presentation throughout the next hour or so. We have a couple breaks built in for questions. So we do want to encourage questions to come in at any point throughout the presentation. You can use the Q&A functionality within Zoom, or you can use the chat functionality if you're watching us through Facebook. And then we have, like I said, we have a couple of pauses throughout where we'll get to those questions and we'll get the answers. All right, can you switch to the next slide, Karina?
No problem.
Thanks. So just before we jump over to the two of them, I wanted to just reintroduce Pacific Community Ventures if you're not familiar with who we are. We are a nonprofit dedicated to the support and success of small businesses. Our mission is to invest in small businesses, create good jobs for working people, and make markets work for social good. We do this through our fair and affordable lending program, our free business advising program, and our impact measurement research consulting program. If you aren't already connected with us and you're interested in being part of our network and our community, I'll share more information later today on how you can get started. All right, so we can switch to the next slide. I will let them introduce themselves, but I'll just give a brief background. We've got Howard and Karina from the law offices of Howard J. Finkelstein joining us. They are general counsel for startups and early stage companies, helping to develop client legal structures and business plans. We're so excited and grateful to have them bringing this expertise to our PCV community here today. All right, so I'm just gonna hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Morgan, and thank you to the whole Pacific Community Ventures team, and thanks to everybody here for listening to us. As I'm sure you know, PCV is an amazing organization. As Morgan just said, it combines investing in entrepreneurship with mentoring, and that's something I'm very much excited by, and it's something that very few organizations have done so successfully. So to introduce myself, I've been practicing corporate law for over 40 years now. The majority of the time I spent with large firms in New York City. I worked mostly with large clients, some of the largest banks in the country and the world, and other very big companies, multinational companies. And to make a long story short, about 12 years ago, I decided that I was sick of the rat race and made the move to become an entrepreneur myself. I opened up my own law office and started to apply a lot of the things that I learned at those big firms to help smaller businesses, startups, early stage companies, family businesses, and help them get off the ground, get through the tough early years, and get through all the tough things that happened to them after that, and helping them not make the mistakes that a lot of entrepreneurs make. During the summer, I reached out to PCV and volunteered Karina and myself to do a webinar, and we discussed a lot of topics, potential topics, and we decided that the topic of succession planning for family businesses was something that had never been covered in the PCV webinar and would be very useful to the PCV community. So I'm going to start by just giving you a 30-second intro as to what succession planning means when it comes to small and medium-sized businesses. And it starts from the premise that every entrepreneur works hard. I bet everybody will applaud that one. First, you work hard to get to a break-even point to just keep the business alive, and then to get to a comfort point. And even after reaching the comfort point, there are about 1 million things that could upset the apple cart. And I think we've seen a lot of them this year, unfortunately. So yes, you're all busy, even busy having fun and vacations and families sometimes. But with all this in mind, on your minds, thinking about the future is very difficult to do. So what succession planning does is it helps you break the barriers of, I got no time to think about it, I don't want to think about it, and focus on the steps that you can take to make your business, the business you've worked so hard to build, survive after your working years are over. And so with succession planning, the first thing that needs doing is to motivate yourself. Put aside the emotional obstacles. And then you have to start working with professionals to get where you want to be. And today, we're going to talk about the motivational side first, about why this is needed so much and why we think many of you are avoiding it. And then talk about the actual work to be done in making your planning make sense. Okay, as it says up there, a great rabbi I know says very often that most people believe that there are two kinds of people in the world. There are people who die, and then there's me. Well, I wish it were all true. At least everybody does wish it was true. And I think this is one of the major reasons why so many people avoid doing simple planning, things like writing wills, things like putting their financial affairs in order, and so many other things that are really important, because they just don't want to face their own weaknesses and mortality. So I'm just going to talk for a moment about the downside of failure to plan. You have a business. You built the business, sometimes literally with your own two hands, always with your own blood, sweat, and tears. You know how to run it. You know the things you need to do to make it run. You've suffered through all the usual mistakes. You know where the keys are, how to pay the bills, how to treat the customers, where the skeletons are buried. And let's take the worst case. Suddenly you're disabled or die. Well, the odds are that without planning, a good chunk of your hard efforts will go down the drain. Simple as that. And, you know, it's not, sometimes maybe even a worse scenario could happen, that your business is doing wonderfully and you're fine, you're healthy, and you're approaching an age where you think it's appropriate to retire or join a rock band. But how do you make sure that the cash to fund your retirement will be there? That's the question. If the business has been supporting you and your loved ones, what's going to support you all now? So it's never too early to take advantage of what you have now and make plans for keeping that successful business thriving. Karina?
Right. So one of the things that we wanted to discuss is who actually needs a succession plan. As you see on the slide, if you're a startup and you want to raise money very quickly and you want to sell the business very, very quickly, succession planning might not be for you. But if you're the type of person who's built your business and you want your business to survive beyond yourself, if you either want to pass it on to your kids or you want to sell it down the line, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, then succession planning is for you. And this is especially the case if you own a business with one other person who might not be related to you in a family way. In that case, succession planning is definitely for you. I'm going to reintroduce the next slide back to Howard, because it's never just business.
Thank you,
And he's going to discuss the psychological side of planning.
Right. So, and I'm sorry for focusing so much on psychology and not law, but actually psychology is a lot more fun than law. Anyway, let's go through the reasons people avoid doing succession plannings. And number one, avoiding conflict. You don't want to choose one family member over another. Or, and this happens even more frequently, you don't want to disappoint the person who's been working for you, who's not related, and you know, you'll disappoint his hopes that maybe he would take over or she would take over the business. But as I'm sure most of you understand, these conflicts will always get worse and more painful if you sweep them under the rugs. Second, fear of the unknown. You're comfortable today, everything works. Why not do the planning part tomorrow? But as I said, the longer you put things off, the more opportunities you miss. It is going on to the next point. It is long, it's complicated, and I know that you don't have enough time. And these are all very, very true. There are moving pieces, and they keep on moving. And that's exactly the reason they should be addressed at a time when there's less pressure. Too many advisors, self-serving advisors. Well, that's a very valid concern. Just to revert to the last slide, sometimes I think that there are two kinds of lawyers, the ones you can't trust and me. It's a joke. You may need lawyers, you may need accountants, you may need insurance agents, you may need financial planners, you maybe even need social workers. You can make it easier, though, by having someone you trust be in charge of those advisors. In other words, they are a team, and there's one leader to the team. And the other way you could make the things more easy on yourself is to make sure that you actually fire people when you don't think they're doing a good job. Small family, no heir apparent. I have one kid. She or she went to dental school. Won't be able to take on the business. But again, as I said, your successor does not have to come from your family. But if you go this route, it's even more important to have an outsider learn the business so they can get into a financial arrangement with you to take over. Let me be clear, some of the most successful transitions are where you find someone from the outside who you can mentor and who can blend right in and even help you grow the business without a lot of psychological problems that you may have with a family member. And you can work with them on a financial solution that will let them buy the business, as we'll see later. So the bottom line is you have to avoid complacency. You have to say, let's do this. And not only let's do this, but let's keep on doing it, because the plan that you adopt today is not the plan you're going to have 5 years, 10 years from now. Karina?
One of the first things that you want to do is determine what is going to be your end goal. There's three options, really. You can sell the business to an unrelated party, and the benefits of this is that you get to fund your retirement. If your kid went to dental school and isn't interested in taking over the spin cycle class, then you have some money to pass on to them as well. The reality of the situation is, it sounds really rosy, but only 10% of businesses manage to sell. The rest just kind of sputter out and die. So one of the things that you have to do is to prepare for that eventuality is start preparing in advance. The other option you can do is to pass your business on to somebody you know, who will be referring to as the successor. It doesn't have to be related to, this person can be one person, it could be two people. They don't have to be related to you. You can gradually sell your business to them, but the point is that they'll be taking over from your role. One of the benefits of this are you get to keep your income, or you get to pass it on to your family members. You get to accumulate wealth within your family, and your kids have a career, a legacy that you can pass on to them. And you can say, my grandfather did this, my father did this, and now I'm doing this. It's really a great source of pride. Fact of the matter is, only 30% of businesses successfully manage to do this. One of the things that we'll be touching on throughout this presentation is that even if you're not sure today which direction you want to take the business in, you can start preparing for both scenarios.
Thank you. So it should be obvious by now that creating a succession plan is not a one-size-fits-all solution. What your plan will be like depends on so many different factors, and we will get into those factors in a few minutes. It's very important, and it's very important before you bring in the lawyer or the accountant that you get a handle on your finances, on the finances of your business, going back at least a few years. And this is for you as much as it is for the accountant and lawyer. You have to figure out, you have to understand what you have there and what it's generating and what it will generate in the future to be properly prepared. And the same thing with organizational charts. It's not just a picture in a book. It really it really will do you good and will do any professional who's working with you a lot of good to break your business down into its components. It's really much easier for you to handle things this way and for your advisors. And with these tools, the financials and the organizational chart, build a story. And I mean nonfiction, the truth, not the movie version. What were your mistakes? What put you over the top? Which of your family members could work together and which can't share responsibilities? Be honest and comprehensive, and that's the way to success in this endeavor. So at this point, we'll check with Morgan if there are any questions, and then we'll talk about the basic areas, your succession plan.
Great. There was one question that came in as you were talking about the advisors and the lawyers and the people that'll you'll need to get involved in the process. And the question was, what if you don't trust the lawyers?
All right, should I take that one up? All right, well, I guess I'll take that one on. It means you're smart first, but that doesn't mean that you necessarily have to trust the first person that you call up in the phone book. One of the ways that you build your advisory team is that you go and you find people that you trust. And if that means that you have to call up and do 10 consultations with 10 different lawyers before you find somebody who really matches your style and your family and your business, then that's what it'll take. It's not only the lawyer. You might have an accountant, you might have an insurance agent. As Howard mentioned, you might have social workers who will be part of the team. And it can get very overwhelming for some people. So one of the things that Howard mentioned that you can do is appoint a point person. It might be a family member, it might be a spouse, a child, a really trusted friend that you've been working with for many years who can manage the team and who can dissect, who can translate some of your advice. I think we had another question coming in.
Yep, we had another question that came in asking, how can you value your business?
So that's something that, that's why it's important to collect your financials, first of all, from the last couple of years. So it's something that an accountant might be able to do, a CPA. It's something that certain lawyers might be able to do. There's certain like business valuation companies. It's really a matter of what kind of business you're in and at which stage your business is in. And there's any accountant will tell you that there's a number of different ways to value a business. But it is important to speak to at least a couple of accountants and try to get an idea of how you can go about approaching them.
And then I wanted to add my own question and comment.
Right.
Is I just wanted to personally thank you for including the psychological side of planning in this presentation, because you know, speaking with all of the small business owners in our network, you can really feel the passion and the excitement they have for their own business. And having my father close down a small family business a couple of years ago, it's emotional. So I just wanted to hear any thoughts that you guys have when it comes to kind of dealing with the emotions and, like you're saying, the psychological sides of closing down your business or passing on your business.
Howard and I work with a lot of small business startups and entrepreneurs, and it really is. It's your blood, sweat, and tears. It's what you put into it. It's your life. And when you have to think about separating from it, because at some point you will have to, it can be difficult. So Howard mentioned social workers as part of your team. There's no reason why you can't have counseling as part of your team as well. Feelings are valid, and they're definitely, I think, they're the hardest part of succession planning. Not even counting the hundreds of tiny little steps that we'll go through closer to the end of the presentation. But it's perfectly valid and it's perfectly normal. I wonder, Howard, can you hear me? Are you with us now? All right. Looks like we're having some technical difficulties from that.
I guess I was the one that blanked out here. And I apologize.
Yeah. While you were gone, we went through the whole presentation. All the questions were answered. Everyone's happy and sane.
Everyone's an expert now. And then I just want to also ask, is it ever too early to start planning? I'm sure it's too late, but is it ever too early?
Never, ever. And we'll go through some of the discrete steps that you'll
really
take when you're
not.
planning, but let Howard take it over.
Well, I mean, it's really not. It's not too early. I mean, sometimes if you.
Oh no.
Howard, we're losing you.
Well, I hope we answered your question, but it's never too early. And there's a bunch of small things that you can do today that'll help you down the line years later. And we'll go through some of those more discrete steps that you can take.
I
that
really
are very
apologize
easy.
here. I don't know what's going on here.
No problem.
We've got another question that came in asking, how do people find potential buyers?
That's a very good question. And it's a reason why you have to start thinking about this early, because it really depends on the business, but there's not always a buyer out there. So this is something that your team is going to be able to help you with. As Howard and I actually help small businesses through fundraising. So we work with a lot of investors, and we have a big investor network. Other people might work with business people who are in the business that, like, for example, you're a dentist, you own a dentistry practice. You might work with a businessman who frequently sells practices and buys practices as a business advisor, and you might bring them into your team. So it's something that is unique to you and that you'll have to find yourself the solution, but it's one of the reasons why you'll have to start early.
All right. I don't see any more questions right now, so we'll continue on, and we'll have a couple more stops for questions as well later on.
I know some of these points came up in the question, but this is really the backbone of succession planning and the steps that we'll be taking you through today. So one of the first steps that you'll have to do is valuing the business. So this is accomplished by taking your financials, going to advisors, and I think I answered some of this already, but usually it's going to be an accountant, a CPA, or a special service. Business continuation planning is going to be something that a lawyer is going to be able to help you with, as well as business restructuring. Because once you decide your end goal, where do you want to take the business? Do you want a family member to take over as head honcho, or do you want to be able to sell the business later? You're going to go to your CPA, your accountant, your lawyer, and they're going to tell you what is the best way to set up the business so that you can reduce your tax liability, or that you can reduce the amount of time or stress that it's going to take to actually hand over the business when the time comes. Then we're also going to talk about corporate governance. This is going to be who's actually controlling the business, the day-to-day aspects of the business, so like a president, for example. Then we're also going to talk about ownership, which is separate and distinct from who is actually determining what the day-to-day business of the company is. These are going to be the people who are going to be taking the profits of the business. You might want them to be the same people. You might want them to be different. But it's good to understand that there's a distinction. And then your own retirement planning, how does that cash into that? Where are you going to get the money to fund your retirement and how? And of course, tax planning. These aren't very discrete. They all happen all at once. And it can get a little bit overwhelming, and they all tie into each other. But these are the steps that we're going to discuss. Right. So as we mentioned before, you're going to have to build the company that you want to see. I talked about corporate governance in the last slide. So consider that there's 3 different types of business leadership. You're going to have the shareholders, who are like the owners of the company, the board of, and who actually get the profits of the company. The board of directors, these are the members who are going to make the major business decisions. Do we sell the company? Do we acquire another company? Should we go into a brand new market and expand? These are the major types of major decisions the board of directors will decide. And then there's going to be the executive, who makes the day-to-day decisions of the business. Do we sign this contract? And it's not a major contract. Do we bring on this new employee? Do we buy these shoes versus these shoes? As a small business owner, you're probably wearing all 3 hats right now. The important thing is to know is that your successors, your family members, they don't have to. You can divide out these roles. And usually that's what happens. There's only ever one founder, one founding generation, and that's you. Future generations of leaders, they're more likely than not working together collaboratively in their own discrete roles. And they're usually happier for it. And this is a good thing. It might mean that your business is growing and expanding, or you might decide that you won't want to divide all of this, that you want to have like a small neighborhood business, and that the types of profits that you're making today are the types of profits you're going to be making tomorrow. And that's fine. Then you're just going to make your succession plan work for you and choose one person to inherit all 3 of those hats. The important thing is that you establish clear and transparent processes today that will allow your successors to solve problems that come up tomorrow. So we have a couple of hints on how to prepare the next generation for leadership. Howard.
Yeah. Could everybody hear me though?
Yes.
I don't black out again here. Okay, so we recommend that you establish a kitchen board, meaning have your family come in. A kitchen board is really a continuation of what Karina was talking about, its governance, and a little bit on how to get it started. The idea here is to give organized management a shot. Your family acting as board members around the kitchen table. Now, I know, having a family, I know it's not easy to focus with your family, to stick to one idea, to prevent the meeting from going off onto issues of personality and things like that. And that's why these kitchen board meetings should be limited to one issue at a time. Should we rent more space or not? Should we borrow more money or wait till sales pick up? Things like that. And once your family get used to the fact that their entire existence and self-esteem doesn't depend on the outcome of one meeting, these meetings could be very, very productive. Now, about a board, I know most of you probably run your business right out of your heads. And it's a very good thing to have that, especially in the early stages of business. But I think over time, it's a pain to bring in outsiders into your business, someone not related or somebody who's not a stakeholder in your business. But an unbiased outsider, especially someone who has more experience in these issues, can be very helpful in setting the right tone. I think a lot of business owners have this already and don't even know it. You call it friends. Everybody has a friend that you play golf with or whatever, go to the gym with, someone you discuss things with when you need an air. whose opinion you can respect. This is the type of thing that you need on a board. You need somebody who's prepared to give you advice and not so bound up in the business that he would have other things influence his views. And then we come to the $64,000 question, the successor. And remember, as we said before, it does not have to be from your family. It does not have to be one person. Hopefully your business is going to be growing and you could have two people responsible for the things that you're responsible for right now. I know we think we're all not replaceable, but the fact is that whether we are or not, the replacement will have to come. And your kid may be the smartest person in the world, but if he or she doesn't know the business, well, they might not be the ideal solution. Some people actually allow their children to come in gradually by teaming up with their best employees. And this could be a great solution, but you have to create incentives for the employee to stay. Maybe a plan where he or she gradually takes a substantial stake in the business. There are ways to accomplish this financially and legally, but you have to set this in motion by focusing on the decision before it's too late. Okay, I missed the first question session. Maybe I'll get this one. Are there any questions?
Yes, we have one question that came in that's asking, can you place your business in a will or a trust?
Very good question. Yes, in fact, I mean, that's something that comes up in the planning process, and it's something sometimes very, very useful to put your business in a trust as opposed to a will. A will involves probate, and having it in a trust means that it just goes automatically to who you name in the trust in the trust documents. So having it in a trust is often a very, very good idea. Obviously, you know, it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. So you have to evaluate what your business has and how easy it is to put it in a trust, how easy it is to run it out of a trust, and do that. But yes, it's certainly an idea to keep in mind.
Great. And then I really liked the visual that you shared with, you know, you are wearing these 3 different hats, but you can plan on kind of passing those out to kind of multiple people after. So, you know, your successor doesn't have to. So how often do you see or encourage folks to kind of have more than one successor and, you know, split their role into a few different? How often does that come up?
It really all depends. I mean, look, you know, let me just go back. I advise a lot of startups, okay? And startups have these great positions called founders, right? And I have found in my experience, it's almost all the time, the businesses that have more than one founder, call them co-founders or whatever, are more successful than the ones that are founded by just one person. One person, it's a tremendous responsibility. I think a lot of people on this chat maybe who've you know, done that, built it alone, wish that they had somebody else to think about, you know, different issues. I mean, one person, you know, I often say, if you're out there trying to, you know, be the next Uber, you don't need to be sitting with your employees and negotiating their employment agreements. You know, you have to build a business and you have to have somebody else to do that. So yes, I think it's very important to have people. Obviously, you need a business that could afford it. So that goes without saying. But I think if you face the choice, you're really much better off laying off some of your problems on somebody else.
Do we have any other questions? You guys can drop them in the Q&A box or the chat box here.
There'll be one other question session after the next set of slides, so we can go on. Let me just introduce. Let me just introduce this set of slides.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a checklist. It goes on for a bunch of slides, and we have about 20 of them. 20 items. And believe me, this is not everything, but please don't panic if you see that you have none of these items checked. And also, please don't feel overly confident if you have most of them checked, because it's just a way of getting you focused, and it's a good way of measuring over time where you're at and how prepared you are. So Karina, start with the first group.
One of the first steps that you want to do is you want to identify a date by which you would like to transition or relinquish control. So think of this as your retirement start date, and consider your best case and your worst case scenarios, and try to plan for both of them, because more realistically, you're going to fall somewhere in the middle. As in, God forbid, something happens, or you know that you have a heart condition, etc., etc. Or best case scenario, you're working for the next 50 years. Try to think of both scenarios. We talked about evaluating your business. As I said, it's a complicated it could be a complicated process. So that's why you should start reaching out early by collecting your financials, talking to some professionals. Because this is a process that will take a while, that might take a while. And when you're thinking about it, don't just keep it inside your own head. Start talking with your family about the succession of your business. Just go up to a family member and ask them, do you want to be involved? Or do you want to buy out your stake and receive a cash buyout? Either option is fine. You want to be prepared. And if the family member doesn't know, that's also good to know. And like I said, with the distinction between governance and ownership, so who's going to govern or manage your business? And then who's going to own your business? Who do you want to receive the profits of your business? This might be the same person, and it might be different people, but it's important that you established in your plan who specifically you want to step inside these roles.
Thank you. In the next group, I just wanted to focus on a couple of these items. The first is the second one. The first I wanted to focus on is the second item, if there's more than one owner. And we already talked about the fact that businesses with multiple owners really need to do planning from the outset and continually afterwards. If your business is a partnership or has more than one owner, you need an agreement that is well thought out and addresses your mutual needs. And those needs change between the times you're 30 and the time you're 50. You have to keep on reevaluating what you're mutually expecting. And most partnerships do start out their business, well, a lot of partnerships start out the business with what's called a buy-sell agreement, which takes many forms, but basically gives each partner the chance to buy out the other at specific times and under specific conditions. You need these agreements. They're essential to avoiding disaster, but letting them get stale also defeats the purpose. I mean, I just had a few weeks ago a case where two people had started a construction firm and they went off on different tangents and they wound up not liking each other after being very successful. And they were stuck because they had a horrible agreement and it wouldn't let either of them escape from the partnership without having horrible consequences. And I have to tell you that as a lawyer, if your lawyer tells you that they'll put together a buy-sell agreement for your business and represent both parties, please do not use that lawyer, because there's no way they can have both of your interests at heart. So that's the first one. The second one is number 3. Have you addressed any personal liability for bank debt? And I know a lot of you take on debt for the company, but obviously at some stage in the company's life, they need your personal guarantee or they need some collateral that you're putting up. And this is fine, you could handle it. The business is doing well, whatever it is. But when you want to get out of the business, you have to find a way to have these creditors either allow you to get out and get somebody else in, or find a way to repay the credit. And this is something you really have to work on early in the game, because you have to convince these creditors generally that the business will do just as well under your successor, that he or she can make it work. This is certainly an item requires early action. Rena?
And on the rest of the page, we talk about death taxes, and this is something that to start considering just in terms of, do you have enough assets? Can you afford to retire? When can you afford to disengage from your business? One of the reasons why you'll be calculating this number as early as possible is to also to loop back to the previous slide to start figuring out a date at which it's even possible to disengage from the business. And also so you don't get any nasty surprises. One of the most important things is you have to make sure that if you have an estate plan, that it matches with your succession plan. And one of the ways that this can get confused and muddled up is if you establish one before the other, for example, and there's a large gap in between the two of them, or your experts aren't talking to each other. So you might have an estate planner and you might have gone to another lawyer for a succession plan. But if they're not talking to each other, then the plans might not match up. The next point is kind of detail-oriented, but it is a good idea to have a power of attorney that will cover your business and your other financial affairs if in the worst case scenario, something happens.
Yeah, can I just add something, Karina? This is
Go ahead.
Of all the bullet points that we have here, this is the easiest to do. You can do it in an hour, but you really should have a power of attorney that says that names a person or even two people who could take your money out of the bank or do whatever is needed to run the business in your absence. I'm sorry, Karina.
Yeah, and whether that's because you were in a car accident or you're on vacation, it's a really good idea to have. The next point goes towards your ideal plan. And it's a bit repetitive, but you have to figure out what is a fair division, because you might go to an estate planner and if you have 6 kids, they'll tell you, oh, just divide it 6 ways. But if you talk to your kids, kid number 1 wants to inherit, to take over the business, kid number 3 wants to be bought out. You have to figure out, and then kid number 4 only wants to work part-time in your business. You have to figure out what works for you and your family. And if you're being offered a plan that you don't feel comfortable with, go find another expert. The second to last point is also very detail oriented. But when we're talking about dividends, we're talking about like cap payouts from the business from profits. So just make sure that you have a plan in place so that you're prepared to carry it over by the time your business succeeds.
Okay. So next slide. Do you have a family employment policy? Now, and this is mostly companies that are owned by more than one owner, and you will adopt a family employment policy so that one of the partners cannot take advantage of the other partners by employing their son-in-law who's totally incompetent, or the daughter who's sticky-fingered and just plain unemployable. But there's a but to this, and the but is that it may sound fair to you to have this policy, but you also do want to actively encourage the next generation into staying in the business, into getting in the business, and keeping them out by not being able to employ them may be something that backfires at the end of the day. And so there are options to do this in the right way, and you should probably speak to a good lawyer or accountant to sort of manage this type of situation. And again, I think we talked about the teams of lawyers and accountants and insurance agents. And I guess we talked about the next one when it comes to transferring your business to a trust. And your personal goals, again, that's very, very important. You know, if you want to, and again, I think we've mentioned this before, nobody who's built a business really wants to leave it. You don't really want to exit. This is yours. It's part defined. Your life is defined by it. Your home is really your office. But that's one of the reasons why you should develop a set of personal goals after you leave your business. Okay, all yours, Karina.
And this goes back to not getting any financial surprises. Actually determine, and the cost of retirement changes every year. I know I'm not counting on Social Security. So that's the calculation I'll take in calculating how much income it will take for me to retire. And you might have to update this year to year, like keep revisiting, keep going back to your financial advisor and ask them, just tell it to me straight, how much will it take for me to retire? Not only your family, but consider any other key shareholders that might be involved in your business. So that might be your other partners in the business. It might be your bank, as we mentioned. It might be anybody else who owns shares in the business, for example, or has any kind of stake. They also have to agree on the succession plan. It's not only a family affair. Your business impacts the community as well. And to the last point, we talked about the kitchen board, and we talked about working outside of that to expand it to an active board of directors. So not only do you have to keep your advisors close, but they also have to be on board with the plan. As we said in the beginning of this checklist, the more boxes you check, the bigger sign is that you're more prepared to actually build a succession plan in place. And one of the better things is that once you have all of these down, once you know what you want to do, exactly what you want to accomplish, who you want to bring into your business, you'll be so much more prepared, and you've collected all your financial documents, you've collected all of your passwords, you have an organizational chart drawn out. Once you actually go to a professional, their job is so much easier. Then they'll be able to look at the law or the rules or the tax code, and they'll be able to tell you, okay, you want to do this? Well, this is how you do it in the most tax efficient way. This is how you do it in the fastest, most legal way. And it'll be just so much, you'll be saving so much more money and so much more heartache that way.
That is it.
Howard, do you have any last?
No, I'd love to hear. But I just want to, somebody put this question up anonymously, and I'll read the question, if you don't, Morgan, because it's a good question. It's a great question. The question is, given the current environment, uncertainty with pandemic, elections, election outcomes, and we are planning to exit in the next 3 to 5 years, is there a good time to start planning? Should we wait until we have more clarity next year? Don't want to react and do something out of fear. Well, you're right. You don't want to react and do something out of fear, but if you want to exit 3 to 5 years from now, don't wait for the next crisis. Don't even put it into the accounting. I mean, there always will be crises. There always will be events that happen that change your plans. But I would start planning right away for an exit 3 to 5 years from now. That's really sort of a minimum time period.
Thank you. Another question just rolled in asking, what's an example of a defined dividends policy?
Okay, Karina, you want to?
Go ahead.
Okay. A defined dividend policy means that, if you have a board of directors, the board of directors will say, if you have, X number, they'll usually establish a threshold. You've had so much profits, and then you only distribute a certain percentage of your profits as a dividend. If you have a board that's really good, they'll do that. But basically, a defined dividend policy could be anything. It's just that it's good to have the parameters out there before the quarter or the half a year or the year that you're talking about, so that everybody involved in the business knows what the dividends will be if certain events occur. Anybody else?
And I just want to share that, you know, the last couple slides that they walk through, the checklist, you know, for these questions to ask yourself, I really appreciated kind of the actionable thoughtfulness aspect of those questions. And we will be sharing out the presentation later tonight so that you all can have that and think through that for yourself and for your business. And that can help lead you to your plan. So that will be shared out because that was one question that came in earlier, and I'm sure a lot of people have as well. We have another question that popped in, and anyone else get your last minute questions in the Q&A box or the chat box before we wrap it up here. But the question that we do have now is, when are the shareholders part of the board of directors? When are they not part of the board?
Well, there could be any number of answers to that. It depends how many shareholders you have, and it depends on the structure you've decided on. And if you have, I would never recommend that a board of directors be more than 5 people, honestly, for a small business, small, medium-sized business. 5 is the maximum. So let's say you just want one person on there who is an outsider, who's not a shareholder. That would be 4 spots. And if you have more than 4 shareholders, you're going to have to find a way to figure that out before you get into any arrangements. I mean, I don't want to encourage anybody to fight over things like board seats. It's not even worth it. The fact is, you should have that worked out before you do your equity arrangements. So that's really all I have to say about that.
And another point that I wanted to make about the board, usually they're making big decisions. So you want it to be an odd number, like 3 or 5. Those are usually pretty nice numbers for a smaller company.
Yeah.
You don't want any fights.
Yeah. And you don't want even, and you don't want 2, you don't want 1. So, yeah.
Thank you. And we got another question that came in. One of the check boxes that you went through was about having a family employment policy. Could you elaborate more about the nature of this policy?
So a policy can pretty much state whatever you want. Usually what a family employment policy and what we were talking about, what we were referring to, was one that doesn't allow family members to work in a company in a significant capacity. You might want to revise. It might be a very good idea in the beginning because you don't want your partner's weird son-in-law getting his fingers all over your books, or your other partner's like daughter who's completely unemployable, just lounging around the office. But you still want to have some type of succession planning. When you were talking about like a succession planning for relatives, you still want to have opportunities for your relatives to learn the business and to actually succeed.
Yeah.
So that's what we were talking about. Make sure that you sit down pretty early on and talk about your expectations with your partners. So say, I have a son and I want him to inherit my stake in this business. And I want a policy that reflects that. I want to bring him in at this stage so that he's prepared. Just make those expectations clear, write them down, and do all of that very early. So by the time, so that you have plenty of time to carry out your plan. You always have less time than you think.
Right. And just to add to that, I think that that's one of the functions that could be undertaken by an independent advisor or an independent board member. That, you know, obviously you can get into a horrible kind of escalation with your partner about, oh, your daughter stinks and your son's even worse and all that. And when they, you know, maybe one of them is right, maybe both of them are right. Well, you're not going to decide that, not about your own kid, and your partner's not going to decide about his kid. So you really should be bringing in, at that point, somebody independent who you both respect to sort of mediate that question. You know, again, I would not want to encourage or discourage having these family employment policies, but you know, you have to handle it the right way with some forethought.
Any last minute questions, go ahead and drop in the Q&A box or the chat. I don't see any right now, but want to invite Karina and Howard. Do you have any kind of final thoughts or last things that you want to share? Please go ahead and do that.
So I think two things. First of all, if you think of any further questions, feel free to email us. The email is in this deck. And secondly, again, I really, I don't care how old you are. I think everybody has to at least think about these things and just make preparations in your head at least, and certainly, down the road, actual preparations to have succession. And thank you very much again, Morgan, and thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you for all the questions.
And thank you to PCV, everybody else at PCV as well.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you both, Karina and Howard, for joining us. And thank you for everybody on the line for listening in. Like I mentioned, I will share out the slide deck, which has Howard and Karina's information and contact information on there. It also has PCV's contact information on there if you're interested in signing up for our free business advising program, or looking to reconnect and re-engage with our free business advising program. We'll share the information for how to do that. But yes, just checking, no more questions or anything like that. So we'll let you go for the day. Thank you all so much again, and be well.
Thank you, and be well.